here, so we're ready to start. Thank you, Andra. All right, so as I was saying, people have been looking for Mount Sinai and evidence. And it's one thing to look for evidence that Moses existed, right? Evidence that the forefathers existed. It's another thing to actually find evidence that God exists and that God was here. And we're going to talk about that today, the idea that this mountain is burnt on the top, and it's burnt because God descended on this mountain like a fire, like the flames of a furnace. And thus, this is evidence for all the doubting Thomases out there that God really does exist. So, let us begin. Does God exist? Is the Bible true? So just as a refresher, I might have said this before, but this idea that we have 10 manuscripts that prove the existence of Julius Caesar, but we have 24,000 manuscripts that prove the existence of Jesus Christ. That's pretty impressive, huh? And that, yes, they're copies of copies, but they are first or second-hand witnesses in their lifetime. Right? That the New Testament was composed within 60 years from first or second-hand witnesses, mostly from first-hand witnesses. So, but what about physical evidence? Well, there's all kinds of physical evidence of a worldwide flood, almost to the point now where it's undeniable. I would also add that DNA and our finding of DNA and our continuing of how great DNA is evidence of God as the author. Did you know we're starting to explore storing digital information in human DNA? Did you know that the human body, each of our human bodies, has enough digital storage capacity that our bodies can store more digital information than all the computers in Texas? I want you to think about that for a second. All the computers in the state of Texas, not just in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, which is huge if you've ever been there. I'm talking about the entire state of Texas. Every computer that's there, civilian, military, corporate, kids on iPads, whatever, all the digital capacity of all the digital devices in Texas, your human body can store more digital information than the entire state of Texas. Isn't that amazing?
You mean one body can store all that?
Mm-hmm. That our DNA has the capacity to do that. Is that, I mean, like to the point where I forget it's beyond terabytes. And it's like 3 or 4 or 5 up from terabytes. That much digital information. So, and if I find, I'll have to share that. If I can find it between now and tomorrow, I'll get you the exact numbers and the exact wording of it. But I looked it up once and I was amazed. So, with all that in mind, do we have actual physical evidence? Because we should have physical evidence that 2 million people plus livestock fled as slaves from Egypt and stayed in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a desert, right? There should be something left behind. But our current location, and we'll look at that in the next slide, is St. Catherine's Monastery in Mt Sinai Peninsula. But however, St. Catherine's Monastery and the mountain associated with it doesn't seem to fit a Red Sea crossing and an exit route. There are no bitter springs of Mara nearby. There's no palms and 12 strings of Elim nearby. There's no evidence of a golden calf altar. There's no evidence of an altar of Moses made of uncut stones. There's no evidence of 12 pillars of cut stones that would be nearby. There's no evidence of a cave of Elijah. There's no evidence of a great big rock that split down the middle that Moses had to strike, and God provided water for 2 million people plus livestock out of it. So it had to be a whole lot of water. And there's no evidence that the mountain is burnt on the top. This is St. Catherine's Monastery. Does it look burnt on the top to you?
No.
No.
It wasn't there when the,
Well, but does the mountain look
oh,
burnt?
you're talking about behind, okay.
Yeah. The monastery is beautiful. So just so you know, where do we get this idea? This is from a fortune teller in the 4th century, approximately 325 AD. In other words, why would she say this is the place? She's trying to drive tourism and business, right? She's selling trinkets. She's trying to get people to come here so she can sell them stuff. Oh, this is the real Mount Sinai. Well, is it? There's no evidence. This is a typical map in the back of most of our Bibles at the moment, although they're starting to change. Now, can you see this is where they're saying this is St. Catherine's Mount Musa, right? Moses is down here. Okay? But we're going to see, and I want you to notice this name here, Midian. Because Scripture's pretty clear that whatever this mountain is, it should be in Midian. And we're going to even see in Galatians 4:25 that it specifically says not just Midian, but Arabia. And it also says over and over and over again, it has to be out of Egypt. And this Sinai Peninsula, at the time of the pharaohs, was part of Egypt. And it still is part of Egypt, still to this day. So if they had to get out of Egypt, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, well, it can't be in Egypt. Is that making some sense? And it should be in Midian in Saudi Arabia. And we just might see that. So what does the Bible say? Exodus 3:1 says, now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness. It came to Horeb, which is a word that's interchangeable with Mount Sinai throughout Scripture. The mountain of God. No, it's the mountain of God, in case you didn't get this. And then what follows is the story of the burning bush. So the burning bush was here. So what Moses, who spent 40 years as a prince of Egypt and now spends 40 years as a shepherd for Jethro in Midian and sees the burning bush and then goes back to get his people and brings them to the desert, wouldn't he bring them to a familiar place? To a place that he knows is the mountain of God, where he encountered God on the burning bush. Exodus 16, the whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the 2nd month after they had come out of Egypt. And this is one verse of many that says, out of Egypt, out of Egypt, out of Egypt. So again, if this is Egypt, right, they got to come out of here. Can't be here. It should be where? Midian. Exodus 19:18 says Mount Sinai was covered with smoke because the Lord descended on it in fire. The smoke billowed up from it like smoke from a furnace. And the whole mountain trembled violently. So it should be burnt on top. And if it is burnt on top, it would be what? Evidence of God himself. Right? Isn't that amazing to potentially have physical evidence of God himself descending on earth? Wouldn't that be a great thing? Galatians 4:25, now Hagar stands for Mount Sinai in Arabia. So that's a New Testament, so they understand, it has the newer name. This is Bob Cornuke and Larry Williams. Larry Williams is a commodities trader. He funded the expedition. Bob Cornuke was an LA detective. He's the one figuring this stuff out. I don't know what Larry does today, but Bob Cornuke is still finding biblical stuff using his detective skills, right? And he lives in north of Colorado Springs. So they had a movie and produced it, but they had to go in there and get through the armed guards and the barbed wire fences and sneak back out and actually sneak in. They had to forge a fax with the letterhead of the king saying to allow them into the kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And they felt like that one little sin was worth it if they could get evidence of this out, because it would change generations. And they weren't the only ones, but they were one of the first ones that actually got their evidence out. There was another family, actually, that the father was a oil executive, so he was allowed into the country, and they were allowed to travel within the country, and they snuck some stuff out. There was also Ron Wyatt, you might have heard of him, but he didn't get his evidence out before these guys got their evidence out, because he got arrested. And they took his camera and took his evidence. So I watched the longer film with these guys, very dramatic, you know, and John Rhys Davies' voice narrating the whole thing, and it's long, and it makes it this hard thing, and at the end they're like, we don't know if this country of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia will ever let people in to see this. But we're going to watch something at the end where we're going to see grandma, grandpa, 4 children, young children, and mom and pa just casually drive up, climb all over, because the world's a different place.
You say climb on over, Bill, you're talking about Mount Sinai.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Isn't that a trip? And I'm also going to show you a website where for $4,200 per person, we could all go see it in October.
Why are they so protective of these findings?
Well, if you're tracking one, they don't want, as Muslims, to show the world that the Jewish and Christian God is truly the right God. So, but now they've realized with the internet, there ain't no stopping it. So they're actually building a huge new futuristic city on the coast with a new airport, and they're going to start selling tickets.
God's home, huh?
But they ain't there yet, as you'll see in the video. But here's then the beginning. After they cross over into Midian and Arabia, they come to this wadi. So, let me see if I can show you this on the map here. Go back. So, and we're going to see a map that suggests a different course. We're going to see a map that they're going to cross here, and the map's going to suggest that they go down this coast and up. And I'm going to suggest they go up here and go through a wadi. It might even be all the way up there. There's a wadi that goes through, and they can walk all the way through to Mt Sinai. And it includes what we're looking for. Okay, here's the map. Why did it go? It must have skipped. Okay, so this map, if you notice, and one of the things it says is they go down and they're hemmed in. Scripture says that they're hemmed in by the water and the mountains and the wilderness, and they can't, and the Egyptian army would be here, and you can't go any further up this coast. See how rugged this coast is? This is straight mountains, and you're not getting 2 million people plus livestock. You can get them down here. You can't get them up here, right? So they're hemmed in. They can't go any further until God gets them an escape route. This version says they go this way. I'm suggesting they go this way and over. And we're going to see this Bitter Springs of Mara and the 70 Palms and 12 Springs of Elam about there on the way to, and this would be Al-Bad, which is where Jethro was, and they have a well there that's called Moses' well. So
Why did they come out and head south? Is there any reason they headed south out of Egypt?
yes, because why would they go this way, which looks dumb, instead of going straight the easy way? Probably because they knew that Pharaoh would track them this way. So they're thinking if they go around and back up, maybe Pharaoh will leave them alone. But of course he doesn't.
He doesn't.
Right? So here's Bob and Larry. So here's this Wadi Taib al-Ism, and this is where the bitter water is, right at the beginning. Can you imagine trying to get 2 million people plus livestock along this coast and then up here? It's going to feel pretty tight, isn't it?
What is a wadi?
A wadi is a dry riverbed.
Oh, a dry riverbed.
Right? So this is the beginning of the wadi, right? And they just walk straight up this dry riverbed, and they eventually get to this place, which is Elam. 70 palm trees and 12 springs of water, just like the scripture says. Imagine that. And then you eventually get to the altar to the golden calf. Note how it has barbed wire fences, and note that the sign is in Arabic and English. So who do you think they're trying to keep out?
Us,
Right?
English-speaking people.
So, within this site, we have petroglyphs of the bull god, Apis. And remember, there's no cows in Arabia. Cows need grass. There ain't no grass in the desert. These cows are back in Cairo, back by the Nile River, where there's enough water to have grass, right? There's no cows out here. So this would be very foreign to this area. Does that make sense? Again, evidence that this is what we think it is. Here's the split rock
Oh my goodness.
with a man for perspective. This rock is 50 to 60 feet tall, and as you can see, split right down the middle. And in a place where they get a half an inch of rain every 10 years, you can see, even especially right in here, there's evidence that there was a great amount of water that came out of here. Right? In a place that there's no other evidence of water. Here's another view of the split rock.
That's something.
There's a crab claw, lobster claw.
Yeah. Okay, so here is the altar of Moses where you would put the animals to be sacrificed in a line and sacrificed. And if you notice, you can see a couple of these white circular pillars right here. Okay, so the altar is made of uncut stones, and then these are obviously cut, right, and shaped to be pillars to represent the 12 tribes of Israel. And this is at the base of Jebel al-Laws, which we're going to watch, which means mountain of laws. Was Moses given laws on this mountain? Right? The Ten Commandments. This is the cave. You need to have a cave. St. Catherine's didn't have a cave because Elijah runs from Jezebel and stays in a cave. In a very prominent cave here. So we're starting to see all the evidence, aren't we? Does that mountain look burnt to you?
Yes.
very different than the ones around it. And that was one of the cooler views I could find of the side of it. Here's the traditional pictures, because this is where you would come up on it. This is the way from the golden calf altar to Moses' altar, Elijah's cave on the right, and you climb up that way. Does it look burnt?
It does to me.
So, we went from St. Catherine's, which was still in Egypt, with no evidence. Now let's look at all our points. Do we have all these here at this Jabal Allah's in Arabia in Midian? Do we have a Red Sea crossing? And we're going to even see more of this in a second, but we have an idea of where that was, right? So that helps us see then the whole route. And we found the bitter springs of Mara, we found the palms and 12 springs of Elim, we found the golden calf altar, we found the altar of Moses with uncut stones, we found the 12 pillars with cut stones, we found the cave of Elijah, we found the great big split rock struck by Moses for water, and we have evidence of God touching down on the top of the mountain. Isn't this cool?
Mm-hmm.
So,
How did he get burned in the first place?
God.
God came down there.
God came down like a furnace.
Remember when Moses went up, it was covered with smoke.
So, livingpassages.com. Christian travel for the intrepid Berean. Does that sound interesting? Here's a picture. Saudi Arabia, 2023, the land of Midian, Jabal Allah's, Jethro, Moses and the ancient routes, by your tour guide, Joel Richardson, and I like him very much. If you haven't read some of his books or seen his videos, I like him a lot. It's only $4,287 per person, October 5th through 11th, 2023.
That's a,
Book this tour.
that's a book,
It's a tour
that's a tour.
that you could pay to actually go with a tour guide.
And that would take you the whole route?
Yeah, isn't that?
That's not too bad.
So a different world from Bob and Larry sneaking in and sneaking out, right? Different world than Ron Wyatt getting arrested and having his evidence taken from him.
Have you been there?
No, I have not.
And you'd like to go?
I would like to go. Very, very, very unique place, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
This is Google Maps. This is a terrain map. Okay? So, do you see how green Cairo and the Nile is compared to the rest of the place? Right? Dry as a bone. Okay? So, before I scroll in here, here's where we were looking at Mount Catherine's in this area, right? But we're suggesting they didn't stop there. They didn't cross somewhere here and then go there. They came all the way down here, and we're going to cross here. We're going to go up to here and over to there. So let's zoom in a little and let's see if we can see some cool stuff. Stop. So much easier on the desktop with a mouse. No, I don't want that place. Just zoom in. Seeing anything?
Was that closed in as a bear stuff, or was that open water? Where they
So
crossed?
this is, do you see this?
Yeah,
Do you think that's a possible crossing site right there?
yeah, I do, but I don't know.
Imagine that. You think God could work with that?
How many people do they have?
2 million people plus livestock. But do you think 2 million people plus livestock could go through deep blue water like that
Yeah.
and cross anywhere else? Or do you think they need some sort of reef? This is called Jackson's Reef, Straits of Tehran. Do you think that might be helpful?
Yeah.
Pretty amazing, isn't it? That maybe God's word is telling us just what. So, this area, this whole coast area, is going to be this brand new futuristic town called Neom, Neom, with an airport and all the fixins, because it's the kingdom and they got the resources to do so. So eventually you'll fly into there, but it's not all done yet. So this place right there, right here, see that? That was that first wadi that we looked through the canyon right from the edge of the sea. And then if you notice, let's maybe zoom that. If you notice that wadi, stop it, I don't want to place, I want to zoom in. That wadi goes through this canyon, and here's our 12 springs of Elam, right? And the palm trees and the springs. This is the bitter water. And if you keep going, you get to the city. You see a city down here? So this is Al-Bad Reservoir. This is the whole city's Al-Bad. This is traditionally where Jethro is thought to have lived.
What makes that water bitter?
I don't know.
The bitter water.
Yeah.
They had to go through.
Minerals and build up, because it's, if you noticed, it's right at the edge of the sea. So it's like the last, it's probably not filtered real good right at the end, and it's built up instead of, if you notice, the Nile opens up, and the Mississippi opens up, right? It should be wider to accommodate more water, but that was kind of thin.
In and out.
So it's probably accumulates too many minerals and doesn't filter them all through. So this, if you keep following that path, you get to where Jethro supposedly lives, and the stop. And then you come to, is this starting to look darker?
Yes.
Looks like God descended on this place with fire, doesn't it? And can you see, if you were to follow that wadi all the way, here's the golden calf, right? Here's the altar of Moses. Here's Mount Sinai. Imagine that. And this is Google Maps. As if, don't you know? This has always been here.
Take that picture way back out, get some altitude on that piece of land. Tell you something I noticed. Go further. Go further. Go further.
Further?
Yeah.
What place do you know?
So,
I saw a horse in there.
A horse?
Yep.
yeah? All right, so now I want to share with you a 15-minute instead of a big long production that's overly dramatic about Bob and Larry and how they snuck in, and and you're waiting forever to get to the punchline. This is just matter of fact. YouTube grandma, here we go. We're going to Mount Sinai. Here's the kids. Here's all the evidence.
For adults, for children, off for an adventure to climb the real Mount Sinai.
Can you hear it?
There is deep biblical history here in the northeastern region of Saudi Arabia. The Israelites were living in Egypt for 430 years. After Moses led them out of Egypt,
See where they're going?
in the year 1312 BC, they crossed the Red Sea and entered the land of Saudi Arabia. They traveled 3 days without finding water And they came to the oasis of Mara, but the water was too bitter to drink. You can't live long without water, and the people complained. This is modern-day Wadi Taib. You need a permit to get here. After leaving Mara, the Israelites traveled to the oasis of Elim, where they found 12 springs and 70 palm trees. They camped there beside the water. Then the whole community of Israel set out from Elim and journeyed into the wilderness of Sin.
These brand
They
new
left
roads.
the wilderness of Sin and camped at Rephidim. But there was no water, and the people complained against Moses. Moses struck the rock as he was instructed by the Lord, and water gushed out. Moses named the
There's the
place
kids climbing on the
Massah,
rock.
which means test, and Meribah, which means arguing, because the people of Israel argued with Moses and tested the Lord by saying, "Is the Lord here with us or not?"
All right, here we are at Split Rock, where the water gushed out into the valley and fed all the Israelites, maybe 2 million people plus their livestock. You look at everywhere. It's
Look at that
amazing.
big valley down there.
Yeah.
Certainly a couple million people could fit down there. The water gushed forth and just filled that valley. This rock is about 60 feet high, and it's got a big split right down the middle.
40 years prior to the Israelites fleeing from Egypt, Moses fled from Pharaoh to live in the land of Midian, now called Al-Bad. When Moses arrived in Midian, he sat down beside a well. Here is the traditional well of Moses. This is the home of Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses. To get to Mount Sinai, we got up with the sun and left at 6:30 a.m. We put Golden Calf Altar in Google Maps coming from Tabuk. You head west for about an hour, then turn right at Baja exit and travel another hour to the Golden Calf Altar. From there, you can see the burnt top of Mount Sinai on the left of the newly constructed road. You go a couple more kilometers to begin your hike. Since the start of the building of Neon, The Line, Trojena, huge mega projects, roads are going into this area now, which makes it easier to travel to Mount Sinai and some of these other sites. There are goats over there.
See, I don't think they want you to go through that. I think we did the wadi.
How do we get to the wadi that's down?
See, it's the back of those trucks.
Really bumpy get down here. Going into the wadi. Yeah, hope we can make it without taking air out of the tires.
That's a wadi.
On the
That's a
wadi.
wadi.
I don't know if they're really high.
Oh, where they're traveling.
Yeah.
Elijah's cave is just right up there.
Yeah, look.
Yeah, just below that little pointy
Very,
rock.
very.
Here we are in the wadi.
Yeah, you're in a Nintendo game. This is a real Nintendo game.
This is such a
We thought it was blocked. Right there.
This is a wadi. Yeah, this is Reimer and I did this.
You did? We need you guys to help push if we get stuck.
This is good. Thing is like you.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Rocks are blocking the way.
Rocks, locked. No, that's it.
Dennis and Michael are exploring to see if we can get out of here. Looks like the car might get stuck. Look at, I don't know, but look, there's frost all on the top of all the sand here. Do you have everything you need?
Everything?
What do you need? Food, water, walking sticks.
Wait for that.
And then we gotta get through that fence and go up to the mountain of God, and there it is. But
There's
first,
the cave.
watch them go to Elijah's cave, which is
Oh, that little opening.
Yep, that's the cave.
Look at the view that the grandkids have of Mount Sinai from the golden calf altar.
Some of the 12 pillars that they set up, you can see that they are rounded. We can see about 9 of them around here.
Brown stones.
These are the pillars that were cut. There were about 12 of them here that one was made for each tribe. And these are kind of the bases of the pillars or the stones that represent each tribe.
And this is definitely a big altar right there, right?
This is the
L shape.
that is an L shape and has a V. So 1, 2, 3, 4,
And then,
5, 6, 7.
and right here, 8.
8 and 9 over there.
Build for me an altar and offer your sacrifices to me. Your sheep, your goats, your cattle, use only natural uncut stones. Ron Wyatt discovered these 12 marble pillars in the mid-1980s. Here we see Google Earth with the blackened, burnt top of Mount Sinai. There is a pin that says Mount Sinai Biblical. There on this next Google Earth, you can see the same pin showing the altar of Moses that we were just standing at.
Okay, we made it halfway to the cave.
Getting close to Elijah's cave.
Can you point to the cave? Right there.
Right up over there.
Okay,
We'll stop there for our shawarma.
great.
And we will hear a word from the Lord. Still small
Let's see.
So that would have been where all the people were.
Come on, Holly. Almost there.
Where are those little children?
Almost
They
to the
didn't,
cave.
they're not climbing to the top.
I wouldn't
They're
think
with
so.
Grandma and Grandpa.
Oh, good.
Come on, let's go.
Speed it up, speed it up.
Michael and Holly are in the cave. I think I see them right there. Their next destination is Mount Sinai.
Where's the cave?
To the plateau of the 70 altars.
The one on the
Right.
left?
On the right, see that little dark spot?
In
No, I
850
didn't see
BC, Elijah stood up against
Changed
the
too
prophets
soon.
of Baal, but then fled from King Ahab and Jezebel. He was afraid and fled for his life. He traveled 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Sinai, the mountain of God. There he came to a cave where he spent the night.
There's a little snow there.
Yeah, down there. Right there.
No, I know. Michael, where are we?
Elijah's cave, we had just had lunch at Elijah's cave. Elijah's cave now we're going to Mount Sinai. We're all the way down. We don't know how we're going with these big rocks.
And then up.
And then up to the top.
Yes.
And back.
We're looking for markers. Wow, that's a big rock. Yeah, from this way, I think.
Look at this. Full of ice. And then ascension to Mount Sinai.
So we are climbing Mount Sinai. We left our hotel in Tabuk around 6:30 a.m. Drove 2 hours to the Golden Calf site at the bottom. We hiked in about 20 minutes to Moses's altar, and then from there we had to hike straight up. It took us about 45 minutes of straight hiking to get to Elijah's cave. It was pretty treacherous, lots of boulders, very difficult. We had a snack there, and then from there we followed these little markers down a mountain. You can see right over there, this was Elijah's cave. If you can see where my finger is, on the other side of that is Elijah's cave. We had to hike down. There was some snow, it was very slippery. We had to use these hiking poles and gloves. And there's also lots of sharp bushes, so we have some thick pants on. But it has been a great trip. We've been hiking now, it's about noon. So we've been hiking for about 2 hours, and we think it's probably another 30 minutes to an hour to the top. So we hope you guys make it too.
Is it cold?
Amazing. Yeah, it's cold up here. We definitely need a jacket.
Look at that view.
Here is the pile of rocks. We made it to the top of Mount Sinai.
Woohoo! Woohoo! They made it to the top. Well, Moses went to the top of Mount Sinai several times. All of the Mount Sinai was covered with smoke because the Lord had descended on it in the form of fire. The smoke billowed into the sky like smoke from a brick kiln, and the whole mountain shook violently. Then God gave Moses the 10 Commandments.
So here we are. Here we are on the top of the rock. Top of the mountain. The rock I picked up. Kind of black. Some different color inside. So that's all this mountain. Until a certain point there. And there's Elijah Cave. That's where we came from.
We got here in just under 3 hours for the top. Okay, so Michael is gonna take some rock out of the Mount Sinai.
Rock on the outside.
Yep.
And
Light on the inside. That's a good one.
we have so many small rocks.
Oh yeah. Dark on the outside and light on the inside. Yeah, that's a good one.
This is good.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah.
Very cool. Alright.
There we go.
Let's came from up there.
There are clouds covering Mount Sinai. 9:20 till 3:50. 6.5 hours.
When the people saw how long it was taking Moses to come back down the mountain, they gathered around Aaron. "Make us some gods who can lead us." Then Aaron took the gold, melted it down, and molded it into the shape of a calf. When Moses saw the calf and the dancing, he burned with anger. He threw the stone tablets to the ground, smashing them at the foot of the mountain. He took the calf they had made and burned it.
Where were we, guys? Where is this?
We are on the golden calf where the Israelites
Yeah.
disobeyed.
They disobeyed and they worshipped what? An idol of what? Of gold, right?
Of gold.
And what was the golden image of? Image of a cow.
This is the front of the golden calf altar. You walk around and you can see quite a few petroglyphs. Moses climbed Mount Sinai again with 2 new stone tablets. The Lord passed by him, saying, "I am slow to anger and filled with unfailing love and faithfulness. I lavish unfailing love to 1,000 generations. I forgive iniquity, rebellion, and sin." Moses stayed there another 40 days and 40 nights to receive the second set of 10 Commandments. There is much evidence that this Mount Sinai is the mountain of God. It matches all the biblical evidence with a large plain at the base of the mountain that could accommodate the 2 million people and all their livestock. There is the altar of Moses, the location of the golden calf altar, with petroglyphs of cows, which was not known in the land of Arabia at that time, but was known in Egypt, where the Israelites came from. The proximity to Midian, the home of Jethro, is also great evidence. Thank you for joining us us on this journey of climbing the real Mt Sinai in Saudi Arabia and all the surrounding biblical sites. Take care and God bless.
What'd you think?
Very interesting.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody have any questions? Or any observations? I mean, have anybody else heard or seen this type of information to this point?
Never.
Okay. So this was worth it. Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So what do you think about this idea that there's actual physical evidence that God descended on a mountain? Isn't that cool? So anybody that's a doubting Thomas, right? That wants to, stick their fingers in the holes in Jesus' hands. Well, this is pretty close to that. Actual physical evidence that God showed up and descended upon this mountain.
Do you think, Bill, that there was more than one God when you look up at the Milky Way and all the galaxies that are out there? Do you think there might be one of these spots on every place that our God is the dominant factor?
What do you think?
Well, I think there would be.
Have we had visitors from outer space?
Yep. I think.
Probably.
Well, we might have to talk about that. We've somewhat hinted at that in the past, that this idea that our visitors from outer space is not like they're flying past Pluto and Neptune and Saturn and Jupiter and then taking a right turn at Mars and coming to Earth. What do? They appear out of nowhere in the sky as if from another dimension, perhaps a spiritual dimension. And they can fly Mach 12 and do 90 degrees turns, which is by our physics impossible. But if they were from spiritual dimensions, if they were fallen angels, they might be able to do something like that.
Well, Paul mentions going into the seventh heaven.
He does, doesn't he?
Yeah, where's that?
So is there layers of heaven? Is there dimensions? So in case you haven't heard me mention this before, there was a rabbi in 1185 in Spain that did an intense study of the Hebrew from the first 11 chapters of Genesis. And for whatever reason, I don't exactly know how he came up with it, but he was able to decipher that there are 10 dimensions, 4 of which we live and know and can measure, right? Length, width, breadth, and time. And there's 6 other dimensions, which he had evidence for, but couldn't necessarily access, right? And then in the 1990s, this Japanese government spent like $40 million in the early stages of quantum physics, and they came up with the exact same answer. 10 dimensions, 4 of which we live and breathe and can measure, and 6 which we can somehow know that they're there, but we don't know exactly how to access them or how to measure them. So with those 2 pieces of information together, then does that go with Scripture that in Genesis 6 tells us the reason for the flood, which was the angels of God came down to the daughters of men and had children with them, and these were the heroes of old, the men of renown, right? Hercules, half God, half man, or what I would propose, half fallen angel, half man. And then the idea of the character of God, does this fit with the rest of Scripture? Why would he destroy the entire earth in a flood? Right? Is it just because of violence or just because of weakness? Because if it was, he's like overdue. Because the last 100 years was very violent, right? We killed millions and millions of people in the last 100 years. So he's overdue, if that's the case. But if it's the case that fallen angels came down and mixed their DNA with human DNA, and thus the human DNA strand got messed up. Doesn't that fit with the character of God to say, well, oh, we need to wipe this out and start over? And that's why you would have an Adam begat Seth, and Seth begat Enosh, and Enosh begat Yared. I might have missed somebody in there. But anyway, you would have a list of the generations from Adam to Noah, and it says Noah was perfect in his generations, plural. In other words, he's fully human. And that's why God picked him. Not necessarily because he's righteous, because none of us are, but he's fully human, his DNA is good, his son's DNA is good, right? And that's how God's going to restart. Then, if you notice, again, character of God and ethics throughout Scripture, this idea of warfare. Warfare is normally where you're allowed to kill and you're supposed to kill all men of fighting age between 20 and 50. Right? Don't kill the women and children. Don't kill the elderly. Right? But the men between 20 and 50 of fighting age, kill them. Don't kill the livestock. But then in certain tribes, God's like, no, you need to wipe them entirely off the face of the planet. You need to kill all the women and children, all the elderly, all the men, and all the livestock. So how does that fit with the character of God? Unless God's saying their DNA's messed up, right? And we need to fix this. Does that make sense? And so even though these are weird ideas, but they weren't weird back in the day. These were traditional Jewish Christian interpretations of Genesis 6 and beyond that said, oh, the angels and man had weird relations, and then this caused weird problems in the DNA, and thus this would cause certain tribes to be more hated than others, and it would cause God then to not only wipe the whole world out, but it would cause God to say, this tribe needs to be wiped out. Character of God stuff. So, I didn't entirely want to go on that, but I figured I'd give you... Do you have questions about that? Because, I mean, that's a big can of worms. Right? But the idea that the more we understand, then the more maybe it all sort of comes together.
Yeah, up to this point in my life, I thought it all did come back together. When I
Right.
looked up at the Milky Way,
Right?
I figured that was God's work.
Right.
And every one of them was covered by our God as we know him.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I came from.
Right.
And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I like that thought that there was one person or one being or one entity
Right.
powerful enough to rule anything that happened out in space with all the galaxies, thousands of galaxies, millions of galaxies. You know, one little inch
Right.
in space had as much through that as they had every, but when they did the Hubble telescope,
Uh-huh.
that was incredible.
Right. Hubble telescope's incredible.
And the web got better.
And I mean, we haven't even begun to explore what the Hubble can show us, right? So the idea that in the beginning, God, and you could just stop there, right? Like, that alone is something we should accept. In the beginning, God. But in the beginning, God did what? Created the heavens and the earth. Right? And so if he is that creator, he's that powerful with billions and billions of stars uncountable in the sky. And he knows them all.
And he what?
He knows them all by name. And it also says he knows exactly how many hairs are on your head. And he knows each one of us by name. And that just should make us think to the point where it redirects our life. Right? To where we then want to study his word. Because apparently the details matter. Right? And get us to the right place. And it should do what? Then it should change how we live. And we should hopefully be better servants of God than servants of ourselves or anybody else that we want to serve. Right?
Is there a website to get to this information? Do they have a website there?
I think this is just Grandma's YouTube channel.
Oh,
Treventures with Phoebe or something to that effect. But if you notice, the travel site was livingpassages.com.
okay.
So I'll try to point out some of this. So, Treventures with Phoebe. I think, and I could be wrong, but I think it's the grandma, not the daughter. I think it's grandma's site. Okay?
We never see her.
Well, but you hear her. I think she's the one, you know, it's her, yeah. And then this was Living Passages. You see that? Living Passages. Sorry, but that's covering up, but it's livingpassages.com. I'll give you another site. baseinstitute.org. BASE, I think, stands for Biblical Archaeology, something, site exploration or something like that. This is this is by the Bob Cornuke, the LA detective guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he has tours, and he's connected with, if you saw that, and you can see some of the stuff, he has some connections with Koinonia House, for those that have heard me quote Chuck Missler, who's since passed, but Chuck Missler and Bob Cornuke used to do stuff together. You see there, presented by BASE and Koinonia House. Right here. Okay, Koinonia House was started by Chuck Missler, BASE's Bob Cornuke. And they have about us. So here's Bob Cornuke. Former FBI trained LA police investigator, now biblical investigator. Right? Journeys include the real Mount Sinai, exploring Turkey, along with Jim Irwin, former Apollo 15 astronaut, looking for Noah's Ark. And what am I reading? So if you can see that, real Mount Sinai, exploring Turkey with Jim Irwin for Noah's Ark, looking for ancient Assyrian and Babylonian flood accounts in Iran, and possible Noah's Ark in Iran as opposed to Turkey as well. He has a great video on the Ark of the Covenant, which is, in his minds, in Ethiopia. And there's some great history and stuff there. He's also found four anchors that are described in Acts 27 from Paul's shipwreck off the coast of Malta. Kind of cool, huh?
Mm-hmm.
So, let's see. And he should have investigations. See? Mount Sinai. And of course, he's got a disclaimer, but.
So at one time, this is where the Jewish people lived, right? At Mount Sinai.
Well, so if you remember the story of the Exodus, they leave slavery in Egypt. They were slaves in Egypt for 400 years. And they go off into the desert, they get to Mount Sinai, and who did they listen to? Did they listen to Joshua and Caleb, or did they listen to the 10 other spies? So they send 12 spies into Israel. They verify that it's the land of milk and honey, but they also describe that there are giants, what I would argue are Hercules-like creatures, half angel, half man, and that's why they're giants like Goliath, right? And so they're like, well, we can't take them. But Joshua and Caleb were like, well, if God's for us, who can be against us? But they don't listen to the 2, they listen to the 10. And that's why still to this day, Jews believe in you need at least 10 men to show up and pray, or you can't move a nation. So then, because of that, they end up wandering in that desert for 40 years. And they don't cross the Jordan River back into Israel until 40 years later. Moses dies, and God does not allow him to see this. So then his successor, Joshua, becomes the new leader and leads them into the promised land and out of slavery, out of the desert, and into freedom. And which is the whole message of this coming week and a half that we have before us of Palm Sunday and the Passover and the resurrection, right? And the Feast of Unleavened Bread and the Feast of First Fruits. It is about freedom, leaving slavery, and that it takes maybe 40 years in the desert before you finally get the slavery out of you, right? And you get your head straight to where you can accept freedom. Which is a scary thought, because if you think of it in reverse, that's maybe where we're going. That we're going from freedom to slavery. Right? Doesn't all things move in cycles? Right? And we go from slavery to Exodus, right? To the desert to get it out of you, to freedom. And then freedom leads to prosperity, and prosperity leads to laziness and weakness. And laziness and weakness leads to slavery. Right? And then if you remember the judges, right? God always sends a judge at the appropriate time, but it's always kind of a cycle. The leader leads us, and we maybe remember the Lord and the Lord's way for a generation, maybe 2, but we always seem to lose it. Right? End up back in slavery, end up back in a poor place, and then need another leader to lead us back to freedom. So yeah.
I heard people coming from a secular site yesterday. They were questioning what would the country look like in 10 years, 15, 20
Right.
years. And I had a vision then of telling them about scripture, but
Yeah. Well, do you remember sort of a debate between friends, just like we've had C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, but another set of friends, Aldous Huxley, right, versus George Orwell. Well, whose vision for the future are we going to have, right? And Orwell's vision was this big brother that controls everything. But Huxley's was this idea that we all get a pill called Soma that's just a happiness pill. And we just take our happiness pill and we're all living solo lives. The government is anti-parenting, right? The government then parents the kids. The government wants everybody to have sex with everybody, right? And that your bodies are not your own, they're for the pleasure of everybody. And so we all live in apartments and we all have sex with everybody and we have 500 channels of nothingness, right? To keep us amused.
Yeah, sort of makes you glad you're 82.
Yeah. But that was written back in what, the 40s? I think 40s, 50s?
and then
So which one of those
he had a paper
is true if not both, right? Because don't we have a little bit of both going on?
But he had a paperback that came out that said revisited.
Right.
Later, and he was trying to. He said that a lot of this is coming about faster. One of the Huxley boys, Aldous, I think it was, coming about faster than they had thought about, and he envisioned.
Because do we have 500 channels of nothingness?
Yes.
Already?
I think so. I don't know.
Do we have some happy pills? Maybe not quite Soma, but right?
I've always been.
Are we being drugged? Right? Are we being entertained? And then going with Orwell, are we being spied upon?
Yes.
Right? They're listening. I don't know about you, but I got my phone in my pocket. Somebody's listening to this conversation right now. Right?
And then there's the big balloons floating around.
Right.
Gathering information.
And it doesn't mean that like a literal person is listening. What it means is they're recording it, and then they have vast algorithms in order to pull data, to look for key search words. And then, then I could maybe pop us up on the radar by mentioning this fact. You saw the construction going on, right? Do you know who the largest construction company in Saudi Arabia is? Anybody know? Anybody know? Bin Laden Construction.
Is that right?
Did you know that?
No.
So Osama bin Laden's uncle, right, a Yemenite who immigrated to Saudi Arabia, started a construction company, ends up being the largest construction company in Saudi Arabia. And I don't know about now, but back in Reagan Bush years, we paid bin Laden Construction millions and millions of dollars to pour millions and millions of yards of concrete for Air Force bases and for roads and for whatever else we were building.
When you talk about listening, this YouTube or Facebook or TikTok or whatever, they look for where the people are connecting, and they've gone in and taken over people's lives.
Sure. Right.
I'm just gonna turn this off.
Yep. Thank you.